Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for the third week of the Institute Rugby Research and Injury Prevention Group 2026 Summer Lecture Series. My name is Hunter Shu. I'm a rising senior at Lexington High School in Massachusetts. I'm a 2026 RISE intern, and I'm looking forward to going into sports medicine in the future. We're going to start tonight with our featured speaker, Dr. Santiago-Rodriguez. Dr. Santiago-Rodriguez is the Associate Professor of Physical Therapy at the Academic Division of Health Sciences at Universidad Ana G. Méndez Cupi campus in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Dr. Santiago Rodriguez will be presenting on movement disparities in Latina adolescents. Dr. Santiago Rodriguez, could you please share your screen with us?
Okay, here we go. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. It was lovely to hear everyone's introduction. I think everyone has great, interest, and I hope that today's talk will serve you, at least spark some interest in the topic. So today I'm going to be talking about the 24-hour movement behavior disparities in youth and how understanding when, for whom, and why these disparities occur can help us design better interventions. Particularly in my case, I work with adolescents, female adolescents. And at the end, I'm going to close by showing how this body of work directly informs the development of WEBA, my current research project. I know a lot of you are more into the sports medicine, injury prevention, and I'm going to try to make a connection between my research line and that world or that field. I do not work specifically in sports. I'm more what is called more a behavioral scientist, and I do more on the part of creating interventions, but I will do my best to integrate how they can be connected, okay? So in sports medicine and injury prevention, we often focus on what happens during training, competition, or rehab. But the reality is that health recovery and even injury risk are shaped across the entire 24-hour period. In terms of movement behaviors, when we talk about the 24-hour movement behavior, that basically includes physical activity, here represented by the running emoji. It includes sedentary time, represented by the chair, and sleep, represented by the sleeping phase. In terms of physical activity, this one is defined as any bodily movement produced by the skeletal muscles that results in an increase of energy expenditures above the resting levels. And some examples of these activities are actually exercising or completing house chores like brooming, mopping, passing the vacuum. Physical activity is important because it improves fitness, reduces injury risk, and support overall health. In the case of sedentary time, there are many ways that you can define sedentary time. However, for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to define it as those behaviors in which you are assuming a posture that in which you are sitting or reclining on your bed that has an energy expenditure less or equal to 1.5 minutes while you are awake. And these examples of these activities include screen time, for example, being in your phone, doing social media while you're sitting down in the train or while you're sitting down in a bench or while you're laying down on your bed. And it also, another example is sitting down to complete homework. So sedentary time have been linked to poor health outcomes, even with sufficient physical activity. And lastly, we got sleep, which is characterized by the restorative state essential for recovery and health. And examples of these are taking naps or having a really good night's sleep. Sleep supports recovery, cognition, and even injury prevention. And when you combine all these three behaviors into the 24-hour period, that's what is called the 24-hour movement behaviors. So if we ignore a large portion of the day, especially when we talk outside sport, we are missing some key drivers of long-term health and performance. So, my guiding question so far in research is when do disparities in these behaviors emerge and how do they evolve across the human development? And hopefully addressing this question, I can help embrace equity, health equity, particularly through research. And I'm going to start right now. I'm going to move on presenting literature that I have been able to publish. And I'm going to go through the human development all the way from preschool all the way to adolescence. And the first paper that I got here titled Sedentary Time Patterns Among Preschoolers, Do Sex Disparities Exist? Is early as preschool, and it was a cross-sectional observational study examining sedentary time patterns using accelerometers and time of day segmentation to identify when sex disparities are happening, not just how much sedentary time children are accumulating throughout the day. And for those of you that doesn't know what accelerometers are, these are basically like physical or activity trackers, like Fitbit, stuff like that. And the way that we do this is that we created some period of the day. And the entire day was divided into this 3 period of the day. We have the before childcare, which is known for being a non-structured period because there are no lesson plans, there are not always adults supervising the kids. And this one went between 5:55 to 8:29 a.m. Then we got the during childcare, which is a more structured period because kids go to the childcare with teachers, they have lesson plans, and they have a schedule. This one was defined between 8:30 a.m. to 3:20 p.m. or 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. depending on the childcare that they were attending. Some childcares went all the way to 3:20, others until 3:30 p.m. And the last period, the after childcare, again, is a non-structured period, and this one went between 3:21 p.m. to 8:45 p.m. or 3:31 p.m. to 8:45 p.m. Some regressions analysis were conducted, and those models accounted for relevant covariates, which included clustering within preschool centers. Sedentary time was expressed as minutes per hour within each period. And in preschool age children, we found that girls were already more sedentary than boys only during the childcare period, but not after childcare or before childcare. And this means, as I mentioned earlier, that it was only during structured periods, meaning that during childcare time, they were more sedentary, and outside the structural setting, those differences disappear. So what this tells us is that disparities are not simply biological, they are context dependent. Structured environments like preschool can actually amplify these differences between groups, and when I say groups, between males and females. And it is critical because it suggests that these early disparities may influence modal development, participation, and eventually injury risk. So what we learn from preschool is that disparity starts early and they depend on the context. So since I learned about these sex differences early as in preschool, I decided to do another study, and this time I wanted to know, well, are these sex differences still remain when we go to childhood and adolescence? And then that's when I did this cross-sectional secondary data analysis that again use accelerometer data and time-specific analysis. And here we focus on also sex and race to identify when and for whom sedentary disparities occur. How we did that, we use enhanced data for around almost 3,000 youth between 6 to 18 years old from the enhanced 2003-2006 cycle. Again, we created a period of the day. We divided the entire 24 hours into period of the days. And for this particular study, we were able to also create for the weekend days because we have a huge sample, and that allowed us to do those analysis. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'm only going to focus on the weekdays. And the ones that came up were before school between 6 to 7:59 a.m., during school between 8 a.m. to 2:59 p.m., after school between 3 to 5:59 p.m., and the evening between 6 to 9 p.m. When we look at who experienced these differences later in life, childhood and adolescence, there are a clear pattern emerge. And what we found out is that girls are more sedentary than boys, regardless of their age. It doesn't matter if they're closer to the 6-year continuum to compare to the 18s, doesn't matter. They're still more sedentary than boys during school, after school, and during the evening. And again, these are not random patterns because especially during school and after school, they tend to be more structured, they tend to be more predictable, and they're tied to environment and opportunities. For example, school and after school period consistently emerge as the largest contribution to disparities, which tells something very important. In particular, in this case, during school, difference in sex was accounted for 51% of that disparity, followed by 17% from after school period. So it is a huge time. And for me as an interventionist, this means that these periods have the greatest potential to intervene or to create a program for them to help them reduce these disparities or become less sedentary. In terms of sports medicine perspective, I do have to say that many interventions focus on access or participation, but very few address structural differences in daily routines. So what we learn from childhood and adolescence, that disparities are not just present, they are systematically patterned across time and population. So far, I have been able to find out and figure out that girls are more sedentary than boys, not only during preschool, but also when they're children and adolescents. And I also am able to figure it out that this is true for during school or during childcare, regardless of your developmental stage. So now I know when I need to intervene and which sex I need to be more intentional about it. So using the same data set, I published another paper, and this time I did the same thing, but I was like, well, I already know that females are the higher risk. I want to know where is more drastic, in childhood or adolescence. So I ran again some regression analysis. I basically did the same thing as the previous paper, and this time what we found out is that that adolescents were more sedentary than children, and it was similar, again, during school and after school. During school, accounting for around 35% of this disparities, and 60% was accounted through the after school period. So what we are learning from here is that disparities are time specific. And in terms of sports and injury prevention, I do have to say that after school hours are a critical window for physical activity and sport participation, but this is exactly where adolescence becomes more sedentary and they're at a higher risk. So what I learned from this manuscript or this paper is that adolescence becomes a critical inflection point where disparity rapidly widens. So up to this point, I know we have been talking largely about sedentary behavior, and I know I told you I was going to talk about the 24-hour movement behavior, and maybe you're thinking I'm scamming you, I have not talked about it. So here we go. So and instead of focusing on one behavior in isolation, it's not enough. And when you examine sleep, sedentary time, and physical activity all together, that's when you get a different picture of everything. So to talk about this 24-hour movement behavior framework, I conducted a study with Dr. Jared Raymer, in which we titled it The Convergent Effects of Primary School Physical Activity, Sleep, and Recreational Screen Time on Cognition and Academic Performance in grade 9th grade. And to do so, we conducted a secondary data analysis using the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development longitudinal study of early child care and youth development. And what we found out was that sleep is positively associated with cognition. Recreational screen time is negative associated with cognition. And most importantly, that all these three behaviors interact between each others. So for example, physical activity and sleep can buffer some of the negative effects of sedentary time. But the key shift here is that these behaviors are interdependent. In the context of injury prevention, sleep affects recovery and reaction time. Sedentary time can displace activity or physical activity and even recovery behaviors. And from this particular paper, what I learned was that these interactions between the 24-hour movement behaviors matter more than any single behavior. So let's summarize a bit everything that I have been saying and all the literature that I have been presenting you. And definitely what we can tell that there are some emerging patterns. First, disparity starts early such as preschool. Number two, they increase during adolescence. Number three, they're specific to period of the day, in this particular case, during school and after school. And lastly, they occur within the interconnected of the 24-hour movement framework. In terms of gaps, we have found that most interventions do not target high-risk period of the day. You always see interventions that focus basically on how to improve physical activity overall or how to reduce sedentary overall in the day, but it's not focused by period of the day. Number two, most interventions do not address multiple behaviors together. And number three, do not focus on high-risk populations like Latina adolescents. So based on that, that's why I exactly thought about conceptualizing wellness and health enhancing program for adolescents, WEPA, and from now on I'm going to be calling it WEPA, which is expected to be a 4-week mobile health intervention for Latina adolescents targeting sleep, sedentary time, and physical activity. And it is directly informed by the body of work that I just talked to you about. The intervention specifically will focus on during school period and also after school period, because as I mentioned earlier, those were the windows when we know disparities are highest. And finally, WEPA will use mobile technology, meeting adolescents in their environment where sedentary behaviors occurs and transforming those safe environments into interventions opportunities. So currently, WEPA is in a formative phase, which basically means I am collecting a qualitative information to understand how to design this intervention that actually will meet the necessities of my populations, which are the Latina adolescents. So we are conducting semi-structured interviews. The script was developed using 3 theories: the social cognitive theory, the social norms theory, and the Davis framework for tailoring health messages. Semi-structured interviews are conducted via Microsoft Teams, and they last around 40 minutes. They are conducted in Spanish or English. It depends on the preference of the participants. They are recorded, transcribed, and then they're analyzed using a deductive thematic analysis. So far, we have screened 43 adolescents, but only 7 have completed the consent and the interview. In terms of qualitative data, we have been able so far, and we're still, and I do have to say, we're still collecting data. So that doesn't mean that this is the final results from the projects. These are preliminary findings. And so far, we have been able to identify 6 overarching themes. And from those today, we're going to be talking only about 3 of them, just to respect time. The first theme is knowledge of 24-hour movement behavior is fragmented and uneven across domains, meaning that adolescents not necessarily demonstrate full knowledge across the 24-hour movement behaviors. They often rely on simplified definitions or incomplete understanding. And this is exemplified by the following quote. Pues ejercicio, para mí, actividad física es eso, which basically means exercise is the same thing as physical activity. And we know that they're not the same. The second theme that I'm going to focus is on the cultural influences of movement behaviors are indirect and mediated through family-based practices and routine. So for these teenager, culture influence adolescents' movement behaviors indirectly through family-centered activities, traditions, and routines that structure time and social interaction rather than through explicit recognition or cultural practices. And this was exemplified in the following quote. Siempre hacemos fiesta en familia y nos acostamos tarde, which means that we always have family gathering and we go to bed late. So these kids are telling me, yeah, my family is part of my culture and my traditions. They shape my sleep, at least. And lastly, but not least, we have the theme about religion, which is religious and spiritual belief are largely absent or non-influential in shaping movement behaviors. And particularly for me, this was shocking not to find any influence on 24-hour movement behavior from religion, because in Puerto Rico, we have a huge influence of the Catholic religion, and because of the Spaniards when they came here. And I thought that this was actually going to be influencing their 24-hour movement behavior, but so far I'm wrong. They have not perceived like that. They say that religion and spiritual belief are either absent or not articulated as influencing their 24-hour movement behaviors. And for example, this quote says, yo oro antes de dormir, pero eso no cambia cuánto duermo, which means I pray before going to bed, but that doesn't change how much I sleep. So taking into account all these findings, WEPA should incorporate an educational component to improve the 24-hour movement behavior knowledge. And it also should improve the mental health benefit of appropriate 24-hour movement behavior. Even though I did not mention that theme and I did not went too deep on that theme have found that adolescents, most benefits are related to physical health. For example, physique, body image, weight, and none of them or very few think about mental health benefits. And there's a lot of literature stating that physical activity improves mental health well-being, sleep helps with cognition, and reducing your screen time is also a huge one to improve your cognition. So maybe they're aware, but they're not able to say it that way. Also, WEPA will not need to incorporate the religious aspect into it, since they have this perception that doesn't affect them. And lastly, but not least, WEPA should include family activities within the intervention. So whatever I'm going to ask them to do, I cannot design in a way that only for one single person or individual. I have to do both versions, that they can do it by themselves, but they can also do the same activity with their families, because family activities and doing stuff with their family is a very important and something very cultural. And if I do not consider that, there's a high chance that they will not like WEPA. So now I'm going to go to how all this findings has some implications for the sports medicine and injury prevention. And I think that basically we need to move beyond focusing only on training sessions and start addressing the full 24-hour behavior profile. And this includes integrating sleep into athlete development, targeting after school and evening hours, and addressing inequities in access and environment. A lot of people ask me maybe how you can do that. I always say measure all these behaviors in your athletes and just find out, especially if you're working with high schoolers, find out what they do during school, what their program looks like. Do they have PE? Do they do not have PE, etc. So to conclude, I want to leave you with this. If we want to improve health performance and prevent injury, we need to move beyond isolating behaviors and even beyond sport itself and start understanding how Jews spend their entire day. So thank you very much for your attention. There is my email in case you want to reach me out even after this presentation today. And I also want to give a huge shout out to all my students that helped me collect data for WEPA. And as you can see, Paola is there in the right, and she's here with me today. And I'm very thankful for them. So I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Santiago, for your excellent presentation. Are there any questions, or Dr. Lopez, do you have anything to add?
Jack, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I was wondering, great presentation, by the way, thank you for it. And I was wondering, by the way, with the 24-hour behavior profile, do you find that also nutrition plays a big role into someone's activity level, like whether it can affect their sleep or just like if their family is known to, if an adolescent's family is known to maybe have more family gatherings with like tons of food and stuff like that, if that affects like their activity as well, maybe they're more sedentary and things like that, or maybe affects like their cognitive function if they're on the opposite end and they're not eating as much or something like that. Have you seen any effects of that?
Okay, Jack, that's an excellent question. And nutrition is always pretty often tied with all this 24-hour movement behavior. However, I do not have particularly studied nutrition. That's not my area of expertise. However, I can tell that when I was doing my PhD advisor, Dr. Eduardo Bustamante, which I also know that he have come to this lecture series in earlier years, he has definitely taken into account nutrition. And although he focused on kids with ADHD and how to reduce the symptom severities for them, we have found that the more junk food you have, the worse it is for the part of cognition. But we have never found anything related like affecting their physical activity or sedentary time levels itself. But that's what I can talk about. But I'm pretty sure there have to be way more literature out there.
Jordan, you can go ahead.
I was just wondering if there were any key takeaways. Oh, thank you for the presentation, by the way. It was amazing. If there was any practical takeaways that institutions, schools, communities could take and implement automatically to kind of prevent the early disparities you were talking about.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jordan, by the way. And well, before going into this world of being a scientist, I was an English teacher, elementary and secondary level. I had high school students, I had fifth graders, fourth graders, sixth graders. And something that I noticed as a teacher is I still do not understand why we need to have those desks that you cannot move from there. I don't get it. And I think if school at least modify that physical environment and students are allowed to move around the classroom, it will make a huge difference. So if I can advocate for something, it will be that way. I will let's make, I don't know, a policy on school of physical environment. No more desks that you can only sit. At least let's change them for a sit to stand desk, or just let the kids pick what they want. If they want to stand, if they want to roll on the floor. But yeah, I never understand that part.
Thank you.
Sure.
Brendan.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. My question's kind of similar to Jordan's. I was just wondering if you think like teachers and also like cur people who build the curriculum for schools should be educated on like this area and like the 24-hour movement, because I saw like based on your research a lot of the sedentary behavior was during school hours. So I was just wondering if you think that should be part of like their training and education.
That's an excellent question, Brendan. And I do think yes. The answer is yes. In fact, there is a curriculum called Great First Aid, which is a curriculum for preschool years all the way to 8th grade, in which I have collaborated with them. And in that curriculum, we teach teachers how to incorporate physical activity into their classes. And they also learn how to promote motor skills. And it includes a structure, physical activity or play session, and it include also an unstructured time for playing for the kids. And during that structured play time, teachers are the role models on how to move. So it has been very interesting. Some teachers resist a bit because they don't want to get sweaty, they don't want to be, jumping around. But we have found that later on, when they keep doing it, they also are more active, they feel better, and in general, everyone is happier. So yes, I do agree, and I believe that teachers should be educated on those. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Angelica?
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. My main question is, what's one of the most surprising findings from one of your studies?
I think now that I'm collecting the qualitative data, the one that I was talking about, religion, definitely shocked me. I was not thinking that was gonna come out. I was like, I even start thinking, wow, these girls are not going to church or anything, but they go to church. They have said, Paola, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paola was the one who helped me analyze all this data. And yes, I think we only found one participant that explicitly said that she do not have any religious belief, but the rest of them have said explicitly that they do have some sort of spiritual or religious belief. I thought that was going to be more influential because I know that there's a strong Catholic presence in the island, and Sunday or Saturday is the day to go to church. So that's a thing. But yeah, that was, for me, that was very interesting.
Isabella?
Hi, thank you for your very informative presentation. I have a rather simple question, and I'm not sure if you touched on it, but I was just curious why you decided to dedicate your research to Latina adolescents.
Sure thing. So I know I did not talk anything about the Latina adolescents or their literature. And the main reason why I focus on the Latina adolescent is because, one, there is disparities when we look across race. When we are looking at female adolescents by race, there is literature supporting that Latinas are more likely to be less physically active compared to their white Asians and their African Americans counterparts. So that's why I have focused on that. Currently, with our political environment that we have, I have not been emphasizing that too much because, as you know, or I'm not sure if all of you know, those terms are not receiving fundings. Like when we talk about Latinas, when we talk about disparities, and we focus on those words, they're not receiving funding. And that's why I have been moving a bit away of that rationale from my research just to meet the current political environment.
No, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
Sure thing, Isabella.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rodriguez. That was a really interesting presentation. I'm curious on the intervention side, since adolescents have so many things that shape their identity, where would it be best to implement new habits? Through church, home, teacher? Where do you think that would go?
So I will say that will not be a straight answer for all the population. I think each population have their unique stuff. In my case, what I'm studying, which are the Latinas in Puerto Rico, I thought church was going to be the place, but I already learned that that's not the place. And I think that now the way that I'm going to go is finding a way to intervene through family stuff. Since they have brought up so much their family time and that they enjoy their family time, I strongly believe that if I take advantage about that family time and I'm able to integrate some 24-hour movement behavior within family times, it will be more effective than going directly to a school or to the church.
Thank you.
Thank you for your fantastic presentation. I have a question about whether you think bias or a selection bias specifically might play a role in some of your findings because I saw you kind of in the beginning stages of collecting data, and I was wondering maybe if the reason that religion hasn't really affected um, your 24-hour disparities. Maybe it's because of the small sample size, or maybe it's also just because you're selecting, you're mainly getting participants from your Puerto Rican region. Do you think if you kind of expanded your data set, you'd find maybe more of a correlation?
So my target sample size is 40 adolescents, 20 males, 20 females. And the point is to get at least 10 from North Side, 10 from South Side, 10 from East Coast, 10 from West Coast. Right now, I think we have representation of all the coasts of everywhere besides East Coast. And I honestly think that is time change. And I think that teenagers, the way that they're raised right now is not the same way that they raised me when I was living in the island. And I think that has some impact to it. So, yeah.
I know you kind of spoke on different racial groups prior, but my question is, do you see trends within certain culture groups and ages? And if so, what can the parents and educators of these groups do to help these children reach healthier physical, like active goals in a world where technology is rising and physical activity is declining?
So I know that I talk about race disparities in one of my papers, but I did not presenting any data on that analysis related to race. The reason why was because there was no significant findings. So, which is a good thing. That means that there is no disparities in sedentary time by period of the day due to race. And I think that's amazing. I'm not sad about it. I'm happy about it. I'm like, yes, one less problem that we have to deal with. So I cannot tell you one group over the other because that was the reason. I think in general, it will be ideal that parents can go to a place in which they get also receive some education about the 24-hour movement behavior, how to properly promote them. And I think what Brendan brought up about incorporating in the teacher's curriculum information about this and how to also include it within the teachers will help a lot with this issue.
I also had a question, especially as the question prior, you alluded to just growing up differently. And also in your presentation, I know that you were talking about negative association between screen time and sedentary behaviors, as well as, cognitive function and sleep and all of these different things that have impact on the health of our youth. So I was just wanted to kind of pick your brain and see how you felt about, potential beneficial forms of screen time or implementing different, digital or different methods of, entertainment that are digital, that are engaging for kids, but, might go against this sedentary behavior trend that we're seeing.
So definitely screen time is my worst nightmare because there's always social media. It's so hard to compete with social media, to be honest, because there's a million things happening and popping up in that phone, like less than a minute. And for most people, especially teenagers, this is very engaging for them. However, I'm not against screen time. I do believe that there is some type of sedentary time that is very beneficial for children. For example, when you're sitting down to read a book, that's totally fine because your brain is being active you are developing those writing and communication skills that you're going to need later on when you go, when you keep growing. If someone is on a screen doing math work or puzzles, that's totally fine. Your brain is active. The one that I have a lot of issue with is the screen time, what is called leisure screen time, which is basically, or recreational screen time, which is basically social media, watching TikTok videos, watching, I don't know, TikTok is a big one that comes always in my teenagers' interviews, but also stuff like in YouTube that is just people pranking other people and we're laughing about that. So that type of things, I think that's the one that I have issue with. And to be honest, I'm using technology. My plan is to have an app for a phone. So I'm still using technology as a way to solve this problem if possible So I'm not against screen time, is what you consume in your screen. I'm not sure that helps, Danielle.
No, that was helpful. That was helpful.
Okay.
I only asked because I remember growing up and just in school as I was aging, experiencing different forms of digital education that, the teachers and at least the public school system here in New York was trying to implement. So I find it really interesting, when comparing to your presentation.
Any other questions? And thank you, Dr. Santiago. That was very interesting. I have two questions. Obviously, if I bring it to the sports arena, right, we know that the NFL has a health and wellness program that they try to promote. It's play 60 minutes. That's their direction of what they try to do. The NBA also does something of that nature, but they try to do more of a health and fitness with the game itself per se. Not so. The NFL just wants activity, but the NBA wants activity using the sport and the game itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know those are great, things. They're just trying to get kids active and they're trying to make them do a certain amount of time of activity. So the first question I ask is, did you find that there was a time that you noticed that there was a window of time that you thought that benefited the youth? Is there an amount of time that you think that you would recommend at the moment to try to stay minimally active? Obviously, everyone needs to also remember the heat. Similar to Texas and Puerto Rico, very warm. It's a little bit different than we are in the north. So we have to take that into consideration as well. Activity in the evenings are a little bit more, and that's probably why the culture is very afternoon, evening, oriented, because the days are so hot. So we often spend a lot of time together in the afternoons, evenings.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask, did you come up or do you have an idea yet, or you didn't really quantitate it? It's all right if you haven't. I'm just trying to figure out, did you kind of mimic it or look for something like that? Because then I'll parlay me into my second question.
So I have not looked into that, like collected data to figure it out that. What I can say is that definitely during school I think is an amazing time to take advantage of, because that's where you're gonna get, regardless of the social economic status of the kid, you're gonna get them in school. Everyone goes to school. And in Puerto Rico, it is by law, you have to go to school. Otherwise, mom and dad are gonna be in trouble. They can go to jail. So yes, everyone sends the kids to school. And I think talking about scalability and reaching everyone and be, fair to everyone, that will be the best case scenario. But I do also understand the part of resources and the part of the teachers that are like, oh, and now you're adding me this extra thing to do. And now, you know what I mean? Like when I was a teacher, you have to do the lesson plans, do homework, correct the homework, and then on top of that, you're asking me to now, I don't know, lead a structured play or lead something else without any training. It is very challenging. So I do understand that part, that side of that. So I do think during school will be great. And if you ask me about time, I will not shoot for 60 minutes during school. I think I will be okay with 20 minutes. I'd rather have 20 minutes of good physical activity and quality over pretending doing 60. And I think it's more realistic. I think teachers will be more open. Like it's not the same giving 60 minutes from my time to teach and prep for teaching than 20 minutes. Does that answer your question?
It does. No, what happens is that obviously, coming from the city, inside New York City, obviously, and coming out to the suburbs, it was kind of funny because I was quite criticized that I chose not to drive my children to school. And they all bike ride. I biked everywhere, all over, from Brooklyn, Manhattan. I even biked from the east side, the west side to the east side to the hospital before they finally had a west side institution. It's just typical in New York City. So it's funny because our children all bike to and from school. So that's probably activity wise 15 minutes to and 15 minutes from. And then Saturdays, they also bike to university for the university program. And that's longer. That's about maybe 20, 25 minutes. So basically, the children, aside from that and physical education, I think they're cranking about maybe 80-ish minutes a day with physical education and then moving from classes to and from. I think that's the appropriate time in which, a child should be, and then let alone if they're going to do sports on, but that's also a benefit or an added plus if they can balance that within their schedule. So I do think an activity aim is probably what I'm suggesting or what I recommend and what I've always implemented. I don't have, no one has to listen to me. No one has to. I do what I do with my own family. And if I was able to bike my entire life everywhere,
that'd be amazing.
And now all my children do, that's the way it should be. I don't think, we don't use a car to like do errands or anything like that. We're all on bikes. I think that's an important aspect to include. Now, another point of that with the screen time, and that this is something that we proactively that we chose, and that was we do not allow our children to have phones. They have watches. They have the iWatch.
Okay.
Now that provides everything that's necessary: phone, location, communication for any parent, but doesn't allow them to be online, particularly during school or any social media, and let alone we don't even allow any social media.
That's great.
It just nurtures I guess, a more interactive youth because they're forced to interact with us because they're not online.
Agreed. Now that you're saying that, here in Puerto Rico, there is this high school in the East Coast that your kids can go with their phones, but while they're in the school, the internet doesn't work for them. If they want to use internet, they have to use to their library, that computer actually works, the internet. The Instagram page is blocked, Facebook is blocked, TikTok is blocked. They have blocked them from everything. Their phone only works to call, make phone calls, and send text messages. And they have been saying that it had been a huge improvement in terms of communication skills because they were struggling with communication skills, especially after COVID. And they're happy with that.
Yeah, our high school does that as well. And both my sons are there, and they don't allow them to interact in any of the social media platforms. And they just took, and then it was a big, there was quite a few parents, they pushed for it and they got it. They removed YouTube from the platforms as well. So it really makes a big difference because now the students are forced to interact. They can't hide in their computers.
Or their phones, yes.
Very
Yeah, that's a great
interesting.
initiative.
So, like I said, we took the proactive choice to use the watches versus the phones.
Yeah,
And
that's a
then
good
this,
idea. I
they
also
don't,
have worked with, in previous research, I have worked with apps that you can download into your child's phone and you set up a timer like after, I don't know, after 2 hours, there's no internet access for this phone. And some parents have used that and they say that it's good. Some, it depends. But there are options. Definitely there are options. It's a matter of, trying them and figuring out what works best for their families.
yeah, and it works best for our family. That's pretty much what I wanted to put out there. A lot of people were very critical about why we were almost like we were a labor camp forcing our children to bike ride to
Oh my
school.
God.
I just don't get it. Um, so on that note of activity, I know that you're looking at the parameters, looking at your variables, your covariates and things like that. How come you didn't try one of the CDC or maybe one of these athletic programs and implement them in school? Because the CDC has like the healthy schools. Do you know about that? They, push for physical education, but again, it's not a structured program. You probably first had to find out what were limitations in your cohort. But obviously, I was just asking, because the CDC has quite a few programs. A lot of them are more behavioral, structured, teens linked to care and what works in schools. There's a couple of different programs, but they're more about mental well-being and behavioral. But I was asking the activity stuff, did you find anything out there that may have interested you to induce activity in schools or within your cohort?
So from CDC, I'm not familiar with any of those that you were talking. I will need to take a look at them. But no, I haven't
Yeah,
not. I
what's
have
kind
not.
of, and again, I do believe they do not provide a structured idea, but as you found out with your cohort, I think the biggest thing is that you first have to find out what your cohort is encountering, right? You've now have a path to try to address the concerns of the cohort. The issue comes out is that now you have to try to figure out how to implement something in there that's going to benefit the youth in a way to get them active. And it's always very hard. Implementation is a whole nother. You don't have to tell me. I'm very well aware of it. Implementation in a population is really a challenge. It takes us quite a bit, let alone with semi-professionals or, they don't want to be bothered with any of this stuff. They're not going to give you the answers. So I'm very fortunate to have been able to gather the data we have and let alone be given access to some of the cohorts. So we definitely know that you do have challenges ahead of you, even though you have a path. You have now a roadway to possibly help them. Implementation is a whole nother story.
Yes, it is.
I know. I do understand, and like I said, I do. So like I said, so the thing is, you have to try to figure out what kind of program you can do that the school will accept into their curriculum. Am I correct that you're saying, but also maybe have a little bit overlap in the after school hours.
Exactly. Yeah, it needs to also transfer to after school hours. That's why I was thinking of that mobile health piece because we do not depend on being there. The phone is with the kids, so it doesn't matter if they're at school or after school programming. the phone is always with them. And I feel that mainly I feel like the people that will benefit the most from this interventions are going to be the kids that are actually not in sports. Because the ones that are in sports, they're already doing something. But the ones that are not in sports, and which are unfortunately are most of them, are the ones that need it the most. So I think that capturing them through the phone might be a good idea. We asked them also about, we have a question in the interview that asks them about what do you think about sending you text messages or information about physical activity sedentary time to motivate you to actually do stuff. What do you think? And so far, Paula, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think so far all of them have says, yes, that will be great. Yes, I will like that. But there's one thing is the thinking about it and thinking about considering the idea, and another different thing is actually committing to the idea.
Yeah, I think you may have to, the way the island is set up, you may have to work on a regional thing. Now, someone will have to Google it for me, but obviously, when I lived over in Scandinavia, in Norway, there was a lot of activities, and the Dutch do this walk, and everyone does it. I don't know how they do it. Someone's got to look it up to find the name. The entire country, families, kids, everyone walks, and get you ready for this. Everyone who's coming from a distance to start the walk comes on their bikes, but everyone in Scandinavia predominantly bikes or does activity from from Holland all the way up, from Northern Europe per se to even into Scandinavia. So it was very interesting. The walk that they do, they get everyone together. Did anyone find it? Anyone look it up?
I don't know how to pronounce it, but
Good luck. Go for it, Anta. Don't worry.
there's two. There's one in the evening, which is the Avant Dagse.
Yeah, don't say. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the country's largest walking event where 500,000 people walk neighborhood routes. And then there's the Nijmegen 4-day marches.
Yeah, Mittigamingen. You have to do both. That one, that's in the, what time of day is that?
It's multiple days and it's um global participants walk for up to 500 kilometers a day for 4 days.
Oh, that's like a set of days. Okay.
So maybe something of that nature where you can get one school to walk to one school, and they say, look, we made it here ourselves. I know it's ambitious, but you can still do it at the after school hour and try to get them to walk from one school to another school, maybe during the winter when it's a little bit, tamer, the weather. And you could probably implement something of that nature and look that up. Hunter, why don't you send Dr. Santiago both those hyperlinks of those walks and that? And they do that all throughout. And I just don't, it's just amazing that they get the entire country to do it. So you may want to implement something like that. Maybe start with schools and maybe work it where you get one high school to walk to one high school. And then you can maybe get one high school to walk to one high school, or they walk to two high schools. It's just so that not only that, you can make it a social event. And then obviously it allows them, maybe have a, evening picnic at one of the schools.
Yeah. It definitely have to be like a family, people involved thing. Like the Latinas here, they just want to be with people. They're very social creatures, and they don't want to do stuff by themselves.
That's what I'm saying. The walk would probably be really interactive because everyone will be walking. The parents will walk with themselves. They'll be talking. The kids will be talking with themselves. And I remember it was very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just got to get the right sponsor to help you out.
Mm-hmm.
And then
That's
you just need a Piggly Wiggly or something down there to sort you out. Yeah, the supermarkets, you'd be surprised. You
yeah.
may want to have to tap into them.
Yeah.
They're very into the community. They just don't get structured offerings. So your pitch,
Mm.
you could probably just come up with a good pitch and you get the supermarket to help you.
Yeah. That's true. Here, Costco gives a lot of money and stuff to the community. And Home Depot too.
They want you to build after the hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Anyway, thank you so much. Hunter, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Santiago, for your presentation. I think it's really important that you emphasize the 24-hour movement disparity because, as for me, I think I've kind of heard about it from my parents or in small snippets about how important of sleep or not sitting on the screen all day. But I think for a lot of people, the emphasis is placed on exercise and sports. So I think it's very interesting that you kind of talk about the 24-hour cycle. Um, if nobody has any more, if nobody has any more questions for Dr. Santiago, um, then that will conclude week 3 of the Rugby Research and Injury Prevention Group Summer Lecture Series. We would like to give a big thanks to Dr. Santiago for joining us today and everyone in the audience in attendance, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you all for the invitation. I really appreciate it.